That one's working, but how come I don't see myself? No, I'm live. Why don't I see myself live on my YouTube live? You know what kind of delay we got. One, two, three, four, five. About a 5 second delay. All right, that's cool, man. So now we live. We live on the internet. That's fantastic. Okay, so maybe you came in ages ago and saw our other little stream with regards to how a tool called BioTrack works. BioTrack, the cannabis tracking software that's used by a bunch of states, and Metrc also another one that's used by a bunch of states. I can't remember exactly how many it is. Let's see if we can find a map on their site. They say partners. Yeah, so Metrc covers a lot. Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Guam, Alaska, bunch of stuff over here, bunch of stuff over here, bunch of stuff over here. So, here's their big old list. And they've been doing that since like 2014. Metrc was the first software deployed for tracking cannabis at a government level, I guess. They had a contract with the state of Colorado when Metrc was still a company that was owned by another company called Franwell. Franwell is a government technology consulting, government contracting kind of firm, and they specialize in delivering solutions built around RFID. Like Metrc knows how to sell RFID. And RFID is a fundamental, underlying principle from, of how their system kind of works. RFID is all over the place. You've seen lots of RFID tags like in your whole world, in your universe before. Here's a quick Wikipedia about RFID. You just go into Wikipedia and find it. One of those tags that's used for the toll booth in your car. Loads of people have those in the cars. These are on shopping tags. Here's some stuff that's like on a little widget in an RFID key. Tags sewn in Walmart, big antennas for reading, again, those kinds of trackers. Another reader here for monitoring things in New York. Here's some small little RFID tags. You can stick them on books and things like that for a library. And one of the things we should notice about all of these tags that you're seeing, these tags and these readers, these are all reusable multiple times. This little tag in a book is used by the library in that book for as long as they have that book. So that means that tag's used possibly for years at a time. And there's a whole bunch more and a whole bunch more. And you can see RFID is, look, it's all over the place. And we have different kinds of things. And then there's near field, NFC. This is like when you use an Apple Pay and a thing like that. Oh, look, it's got like a bunch of nice diagram on there. Anyways, a bunch of other stuff about RFID. That's what RFID is. It's those tags. So in Metrc, let's go here and let's just draw a little picture. In Metrc, you'll have a tree like this. This is my tree, and I'm a terrible artist, so, give me a fucking break. And then on this little tree that you've created, you're going to have a little RFID tag. This is your RFID tag right here. And every tree has that. So if you have 4,000 trees, you're not even going to believe this, but you will have 4,000 RFID tags. And Metrc, that's how they get their money. That's how they keep that business going. Is they get a couple of bucks from the state for their track and trace system from the state, and then they get 40 cents per plant tag or 50 cents per. I'm sorry, 40 cents per plant, like 25 cents per package tag. Let's look. Here is another company called Distru. I don't know if you've ever heard of Distru, but they talk specifically about Distru being used in Massachusetts. So we'll just pick them, and they've got this. You have to use Metrc. It has to be in there. Something. Cost of Metrc tags in Massachusetts. The plant tags are 45 cents, and the package tags cost 25 cents each. So it's not very it is not very difficult for a farmer to end up spending thousands of dollars a year on these tags. And this is a good site. Thanks, Distru, for the information. What does it look like if you are a cannabis farmer? Okay, so now you have your tag, you have your trees here, and you have like hundreds of trees, and so therefore you also end up having like hundreds of these RFID tags attached to your trees. When you make those trees, and then you got to put all your trees into a package. Now you got to put a 25-cent packet tag on every package that you're sending out, and this is so that people enforcement can use some kind of like RFID reader. You have to have a special widget for reading these RFID tags. Here's some from Atlas RFID store. Again, no affiliation. You use something like this. So you can show up at somebody's facility and you can see, oh, well, they've got, electronically, they say they have 100 plants in the system. It's probably a larger number of plants, 2,000, 10,000, not uncommon. But I'm making numbers that are easy to work with. They've got 100 trees. The system from the enforcement side says they have 100 trees. Enforcement can show up with one of these phasers, wave it around in your grow facility. And after waving it around in a grow facility, it'll tell them, oh, look, we've scanned 100 tags. And now they feel like their audit is done. Never minding the fact that it's pretty easy for folks to move a tag from one tree to another. The whole point of these RFID tags, let's just go on a little bit of a rant on the side. The whole point of the RFID tag is so that we can prevent, in the track and trace universe of cannabis, is so that we can prevent inversion and diversion. And inversion and diversion are the things that, I guess, keep the regulators up at night. They're worried about this material that you've grown here, and it'll leave and it'll go over here into this gray market. That's the letter G. That's a gray market area. And maybe way over here we have like the proper retail universe. Much better on that drawing than this G. Sorry, again, not an artist. So we meaning cannabis regulators, they don't want these trees to end up going over here to this diverted market. They want your trees to go through the nice little flow. Ooh, I've gone too far. They want your trees, and they want this material to go through this nice little flow where it's this plant, it goes through to some packaging, and then it goes over here to a retailer. This is what we want to happen. We want this happy path to occur, and this agency's got tax requirements involved and things that change from state to state. We don't have to get into all of that kind of stuff. But now all my trees and all my tags, and incidentally, I still have my RFID tags are still, here's a bunch of tags I'm shipping over, and here's a bunch of tags I'm shipping over. Not a lot of retailers are doing stuff with RFID when the material's coming in. The interesting thing is all of these RFID tags that are produced by Metrc they also include a standard barcode on them. And that barcode's there because not everybody has an RFID reader. Those prices from those RFID readers, those things can be a few $100s. Those things can be like $2,000. So then somebody can show up here and they can scan and on these RFIDs, they can wave the phaser around and they can say, oh yeah, well now we know that the stuff hasn't been moved, because when you use RFID tags for your cannabis farm, it's completely impossible to have a tree that doesn't have a tag on it, and it's completely impossible to have some cannabis material in a bin that hasn't been tagged yet. And it's completely impossible to have packages in your universe that don't have these tags on them. This is, of course, a little bit of a joke. You can get away with having tags not on the stuff all over the place. We've been in cannabis regulations for like 10 plus years, and I feel like we've been on the tour of many farms. And if you go through and look at some FOIA requests from these state agencies about the kinds of issues, violations, written warnings, verbal warnings that a lot of these farmers have gotten, loads of them get a traceability type of violation. The traceability violation is they had something that wasn't tagged. They had trees that weren't tagged. They had packages that weren't tagged. So they say, oh, well, please come in and make sure all your stuff gets tagged properly. So, RFID, the technology itself, just having it as the choice for the solution does not add anything to your inversion, diversion, prevention. Track and trace of its own accord does a little bit for it, but, naturally, folks who want to play dirty are going to play dirty. Folks who are going to play clean and by the rules, guess what? They're going to be playing clean and playing by the rules. And I feel like that's probably happening in the sort of standard normal distribution that in cannabis, that it happens in, every other kind of industry. We submitted an RF something. We responded to more than one state agency's requests for track and trace replacements. Some states are already using Metrc, but because of the contract term limit, 4 years, 5 years, and because of, state regulations, they've got to put out an RFP for a new system when those contracts are up. Or, Metrc responds to those RFPs too and possibly gets the renewal. And in Massachusetts and Michigan, Metrc got the renewal. We'll come back to that in I guess, a little bit. So in that whole process, we talked to these agencies and the regulators. The regulators absolutely love the RFID. And there seems to be some misconception on the regulatory side that having RFID is itself going to be the mechanism that prevents inversion and diversion. Again, if you go into a facility and it's a large room, visually looking at that room, you could not tell the difference between 200 trees and 250 trees. The only way to check that is to count every single tree. And one of the nice things that RFID lets folks do is just stand in one side of the room and wave their RFID phaser. This isn't one, but it's something like that. And they wave their phaser around in the room. And then the phaser comes back and says, oh, there's 200 trees in the room. And if you look at the electronic record in the track and trace system, that'll show that there's 200 trees in this room. And now everybody says, oh, well, there's 200 trees in this room, and everyone's happy about it. But you would have to go and look at every single tree in the room to see if it's missing the RFID tag. Anyways, and spotting a missing tag is a lot easier than maybe spotting a missing identifier specifically. If you're not using RFID and you wanted to audit that room, you wanted to audit the inventory for one of these farmers or these processors, you would have to beep every single tag. But that's what an audit is supposed to do. That's how Walmart's and Kroger's are doing their inventory audits. They're sort of not waving an RFID gun over in this area and saying, oh, yes, well, we have exactly as many things as this whole mechanism reports. an RFID is also not a perfect solution. It is possible for various reasons that you wave your ID reader around in a room, and the ID reader in the room doesn't give you 200 trees in that example room. You look at it and it says, oh, I have 197 trees. There's just 3 tags that haven't scanned. So you can walk around the room and try to find out where, oh, maybe these tags aren't responding. Like the tag gets buried in a little bit of dirt, or the tag is over here, or this and this and this can cause these kinds of issues with counting the material. And so just like BioTrack and Metrc, or excuse me, just like BioTrack and the previously existing Leaf data, we have this universe of identifiers. Let's do this little thing here too. Here's Metrc, and then over here we'll have some government agency. That's the government agency, and this G over here is the gray market, which we're going to put like a red line through it because we don't want people selling into the gray market. That's, you know, that's not what cannabis regulations are for. So when you grow these things in this RFID based universe, one of the things you got to come up with is you got to get all these RFID tags. Again, 40 cents, 20 cents. I'm sorry, it's 45 and 25. It changes depending on what state you're in. But you buy all of these tags, and these tags go from Metrc into the grower, and these tags go from Metrc into the processor. Retailers don't have to deal with this, mostly because everything that happens at the retail site, it's showed up there already packaged, ready to go. It's in a little jar, it's in its little baggie, or it's showing up as some like bulk material if your state, your region allows a deli style sale. I'm in Massachusetts. We can do deli style. So that's interesting. When you sell that package into the retailer, that's one package with just like one RFID tag on it. And there's some other misconception that every individual item that you purchase from the retailer, you know, so here's something I've just purchased in Massachusetts. I'm not trying to show off any brands or anything like that, but it does not come out from the retailer. It does not come with an RFID tag on it. But the grouping of that stuff as it arrived could have had, oh, this bundle, this RFID package tag represents this quantity 50 of these units that I'm selling to the retailer. So it's not really a it's not, you know, it's not like an individual RFID tag on every can of soda. You could be thinking about it as like it's an RFID tag for every sealed pallet of a specific kind of soda pop. You can beat that tag. Another big unfortunate thing is that these RFID tags from Metrc, they are single use. Here's a little video that we found on the internet. This is an average sized outdoor farm. And here is piles and piles and piles of our single-use RFID tags from Metrc. You know, you can just see it's a lot of waste. There's a lot of plant tags involved in this. You know, when Metrc tells you that they've tracked like 1 billion trees in their system, and I don't know that it's 1 billion trees or 1 billion packages, but it's a very large number. Multiply that by 40 cents, 45 cents. Now you can see how much money Metrc's producing off of these RFID tags, which interestingly enough, let's talk back to our responses to Massachusetts and Michigan. Both of those states, you know, when we were submitting our bid for the track and trace solution to those states, OpenTHC was bidding in the millions of dollars. You know, like our contract was going to, I believe, I'm going from memory here, I don't have my notes in front of me. I think our bid for the state of Michigan was like $5 or $6 million. And I think it was something pretty high like that also for Massachusetts. I say pretty high because, one, jokes about being high are hysterical on our cannabis, you know, themed feed and live streams and videos and shit. But also because the competing bids coming from Metrc's bidding, we're bidding effectively $1 million a year kind of contract, and Metrc is bidding $100,000 a year contract. So on its face, when the state looks at our two things, our solution, even though we are having free and open source software, you still got to pay the servers and you got to pay the staff to keep the system going. And there's a bunch of support requirements that the state has, things like this, that I don't think it would be possible to operate a track and trace solution for any of these states for $100,000. Massachusetts is a, is a state that's got a reasonably good, Boston, big city, downtown earners right there, and that affects a bunch of people here on the East Coast. Washington State has a similar problem. Well, you're going to have some IT specialists in Michigan, or you're going to have IT specialists in Missouri or Maine who are operating these kinds of systems. And in a lot of these states, in a lot of parts of America, the IT specialist who would be responsible for taking care of that system is a kind of job that pays close to $100,000 a year. So Metrc's bid is basically the cost of like one full-time employee to handle all this stuff. Like, how does that math work out? The math ain't mathin', is what folks say sometimes. Well, it is not terribly hard for a state to grow 1 million trees. And Metrc needs to bid, and you got to pay Metrc 45 cents for every tag. So if you have 1 million trees going in your state, which is, again, a fairly easy number to get, well, Metrc's made $400,000 off of that year. So now, look at that. The cost of operating Metrc in that state isn't $100,000 bid to the state. It's now costing the state, although it costs the state directly $100,000, the cost to the cannabis industry in the state is the $100,000 that the state's paying Metrc, and then the $400,000 that our conservative estimate of trees being produced in the state pays to Metrc. Never minding the fact that there's a whole bunch of packages that are being deployed, and there's at least another 1 million packages deployed in the state. So that's another $250,000 of 25-cent tags. And so now Metrc has, in an annual basis with some conservative estimates, come out with roughly 450 plus 250 is 700, and then the 100 for the state. So they're at 800,000. And now there's more than 1 million trees being grown in these states, and there's more than 1 million packages going in these states. So Metrc's numbers are better than 800K per annum per state that they operate in. And that's why when we bid and we showed up and had our bid at $1 million a year for the cost of operating the track and trace infrastructure, we didn't feel like we were too far out of line for what the cost to run that operation is. With the difference, we don't do RFID. We don't want to do RFID. We've got a bunch of other beliefs of how the system should work that do not align with what Metrc believes and with what, things Metrc has convinced our regulators is sort of a requirement for the mechanism. And then even still, we have all these RFID tags, expensive and wasteful RFID tags, and we have to get those from Metrc, a single source monopoly provider, and they're single use, so I can't use them again, which is kind of unfortunate because loads of other RFID things allow for reuse of the tags. And even still, with all of this infrastructure in place, just like when we have the BioTrack universe or the Leaf Data universe, these farmers, they have this information about the trees and these RFID tags. Well, they got to send it to their government agency. And when they ship the material over to this processor is having a data relationship with the government agency, and this retailer is having this data relationship with the government agency. All of them still have to do this. They're all still doing this electronic reporting and saying, oh, well, I have these tags, and now I've put these tags on some trees, and then you tell the government agency about it, which is exactly what you do with the BioTrack systems that do not require expensive, wasteful RFID systems, which is exactly what would happen if folks were deploying a free and open source cannabis track and trace solution like ours. You still got to report all this data to the state. But, BioTrack and ourselves, we don't have 45-cent plant tags. We've got penny cost plant tags. You still got to tag your trees. That's what track and trace is requiring folks to do. You still got to tag your trees, but you can do it for a penny, and you can take that cost away from the farmer and make the whole cost that's being borne out by the industry. It's, the cost is somewhere. It's just Metrc's able to make that an external cost to the state agency. Now it's a cost that's borne by the farmer. That's a cost that's borne by the processor. It's a cost that manifests itself in the cost of goods sold acquired by the retailer, and therefore it's also a cost that shows up to the consumer at the end of the day. And there's lots of people have lots of strong opinions about cannabis taxes. I won't try I'll try not to rant and rave about that part too much, but I will like to just throw in here that many of the states have hundreds of millions of dollars coming in tax revenues. And so for the state, when the state is operating a system like this, when the state is operating a track and trace universe, if the state has to pay $100,000 a year for a track and trace solution, or the state's paying $1 million a year for a track and trace solution, that is a difference that is hardly noticeable to the state agency. Because again, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenues, but the cost is still existent in the industry. The cost wouldn't go away from the industry. It's just Metrc's been able to externalize that cost from them, put it directly into somebody else, therefore making it not the state problem. And of course, the state regulators are like, oh, you can solve our problems for us and eat the blame. No big deal. And I'm sort of running out of time here, but the last little bit of this is this government system over here that I'm pointing to is some fancy database. I'll use this thing maybe, or this one, this blue. There's a fancy database right here that all this data goes into. All of the data that the farmers are pushing up to this system, this government system, goes into this database. That database and all this stuff is owned by Metrc. So a lot of these states, you can tell them, hey, I'd like to get a FOIA request and get some information out of the system. They say, oh, well, we don't have access to that system because the state agency doesn't own the solution. They don't have a complete set of rights to the data and what's going on in that system, which makes it difficult or contractually impossible for the state agency to deliver information to the citizens in that state. Something very interesting happened in cannabis in 2014. Colorado was running Metrc, and it was a closed system. And in fact, at that point, didn't even have an API to talk to. And Washington State launched BioTrack. Washington State had some fairly strong sunshine laws. And then the wonderful thing about the BioTrack and contract with that agency, that Liquor and Cannabis Board in Washington State, one of the nice things that happened there, again, with all these sunshine laws for FOIA requests, is interested parties could get a database dump from the state agency. It was very interesting to see everybody's trees, what their tree counts were, and how long those trees were alive, and who they're doing the business deals with, because you're getting every B2B transaction, and you're getting details on every tree, you're getting details on every inventory, but also importantly, you were getting details on all these lab results. And having free and open citizen access to that data was a little bit of a hassle for the agency because, well, other folks could look at the data and then point out interesting things like, hey, agency, this farm is very young, but has already processed 1 million trees. What's going on in there? Very simple data anomaly, bug in a software, whatever. It's no big deal, but this agency had to deal with the question. This is one of the reasons these sunshine laws aren't so popular, is who in a position of authority wants to be held accountable? No, I want the authority and I want the compensation for being the authority, but I don't want anybody to question that authority. It's kind of a hassle. But those citizen data inspectors in Washington, and with the free access to that data, those citizen inspectors were also able to look at deals and say, hey, look, these deals look shady. This relationship between this producer and this farmer, or this processor and this retailer, appears to be a little too strong. there were some rules about who can sell what for what kind of price, so that citizens could do that investigation. Other cannabis industry participants could get access to that data and scrutinize, and ask questions about other participants in the industry. Oh, this participant looks like they're doing a dodgy deal. I heard they're selling stuff below rate. And then you can look it up in the data. And then another interesting thing happened with regards to lab results. And in Washington State specifically, there was a data scientist who was paying attention to Washington lab results. Let me see if I can find him. Labbiness in Washington. Oh my gosh. So here's the thing that this dude came out with in 2015. And here's a very old blog post from a group called Straight Line Analytics, and reproducing. He's talking about these things, and he's making the data available to himself and pulling out the stuff, looking at these test results, 14 labs and something. Here's a potency posting. So this person, and just an enthusiast data analyst nerd, is like, oh, here's our average potency THC lab results. I happen to know this fella, full disclosure here. I know this fella. I know that he was very enthusiastic about the science, and trying to figure this out and seeing, like, how come this lab average reported THC? Look, lab K and lab M are just like popping off. Why are these labs giving abnormally, high results? Now, these are different values here. There was some data anomalies that needed to be worked out in this, like, BioTrack data. But the point being, from all of that, it was possible for these, citizen data scientists with the free access to the data. They could get in there and they could sort of pull that stuff up. And, that fella at Straight Line Analytics, he was writing that information out 2015, 2016. I think it came around in, like, maybe it was 2018 or 2019. One or two of these labs was doing something dodgy and the state shut them down, and this citizen data scientist was pointing out these kinds of anomalies a year or two before the regulatory agency was even going to act on that information. And it sort of feels like, oh, maybe that never would have even happened if we hadn't been able to get out there and gain access to that data. So that's sort of how Metrc works. An overview of how the Metrc ecosystem exists and what they want to try to do and what they want to accomplish. I'm hoping that this helps everybody get a little bit more information about how Metrc goes. If you got any questions, hit me up on the chat or something like that, or find us on the internet and let me know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, cool. Thanks.